All right. I have with us here today a extremely brilliant man out of Seattle who's on the forefront of AI and applications um, in many professional industries. Nate Strong. Nate Strong is somebody that our firm has been working with, and I don't think that I am selling Nate. I'm not trying to, exaggerate or anything like that. Nate is somebody that is like he is a seer into the future. Nate is a brilliant man. He gets into organizations and he sees what's happening with organizations, is able to create efficiencies with rapidity. And he's also able to build out infrastructure for the organizations and the clients that he has. It is an absolute privilege to be talking to you, Nate. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for chatting. I always appreciate conversations with you, Adam. So this is great.
Yeah. So you are the president and CEO of an organization called Strong CRM.
Correct.
What is Strong CRM?
Yeah. So Strong CRM at its core is in the very basic level is a premier and boutique Salesforce partner. So what that means is we work inside almost exclusively inside the Salesforce ecosystem, which could include tools like Slack, which a lot of people know about, or some more technical tools like Tableau or MuleSoft. But a lot of people know Salesforce from their big towers in big cities and their CRM product. And that's a lot of what we do is implement and optimize Salesforce and adjacent tools for companies, largely in the legal space, also in the financial services space, and in the healthcare space, and then also in the field service, so plumbing and roof repair and things like that. So those are kind of the industries that we focus on in that area. And I founded the company a little over 4 years ago. I started it by myself. I actually have a background in actually doing development. I do some software development. I do some Salesforce development. I don't do much of that anymore by myself because now we have a team of about over 60 people that do a lot of the hands-on keyboard work, but I still get to interact with a lot of the clients on the strategy and um, and the architecture of what we're building. So, yeah.
So, I mean, full disclosure, we are building a product together.
Yes.
We've called it CaseForge, and when you were good enough to spend some time with the organization, and you spent a good amount of time learning about how we run things. And I am not exaggerating. You picked up what our organization was doing with light speed. And it made me wonder how you um, developed that knack to go into an organization and figure out what makes it work, like how they, what their inbound looks like, what their work product looks like, how their org structure is set up. You just like diagnosed it so fast. I was like, this man understands. And so how did you come to do that?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things, but I draw on a lot of experience that I've had throughout my career. First of all, especially in being before I started this company, I was in all sections of the revenue cycle, right? So I've hit every single piece of the overall revenue cycle at various businesses and past jobs that I had before I founded my own company, right? So the understanding of funnels, right? Sales funnels, marketing funnels, existing client operations. I've done a lot of that myself and and largely, not at bigger companies, but at smaller companies where we don't have a lot of structure and systems. So I've had to learn the breadth of of each one of those areas of business and then solve problems that we don't have anybody else to solve them with. And often I've used my, I guess I should say, knack for technology and my software development skills to solve my own problems, even though I was on the revenue side of the house. So I was like, running marketing or running sales or running client success. And I learned how to build out technology tools to help make my life easier, basically, across those funnels. So that's the first piece. I think that helps me go into a lot of businesses and be able to understand, hey, oh, this is how you're generating business, right? And, every business has its own flavor of that, but they're all trying to do a lot of the same things, especially for, kind of sales cycles like yours that have a large relationship component to it, right? You obviously have a deep relationship with your clients. And so understanding how you build that relationship over time, that's something that I've done for years, right? I think the second piece is working in law, spoiler alert, you're not the first law client we've worked with. So understanding kind of the legal landscape, and specifically we work with some legal technology players. And so understanding what the unique needs of a law firm are is typical for what we do. So I think that's the second piece. And then I think the third piece, I'll give you some credit, a lot of credit. I think you're really good at explaining what you do, and you have a passion for, you yourself also built a business, right? And you have a passion for explaining end to end how everything works. And I will say that there was a moment when when I met with you in person at Zayed's headquarters, and basically I said, walk me through the process, something like walk me through the process of, how you actually manage a case. And you went through end to end and described it. And then you had to be called out of the room for something. And Jim turned to me and goes, wow, I've never heard Adam explain it in exactly that complete of terms as well before. And that was really cool, because I was like, I was able to extract that from you and get a lot of information. So I think a lot of it has to do with our conversations and your ability to explain the unique way that you all work with your clients as well. So I'd say those three things, if that's fair for you.
I mean, I'm not going to call you a vendor, but we've worked with many different organizations over the course of the years. And, like when you are there and you're intently diagnosing the organization, your understanding and like sort of like the library that you're accessing is huge. I was like, I could tell that Nate not only understood everything, but he could see like the future developments. Were there a synergy between what my organization is doing and what you'd build out? You could see where it could go. I was like, oh man, he's really like building this whole architecture right now. And that's inspiring, because I personally really enjoy working with super talented people who are on the cutting edge of the industry. And I mean, that's you. That's you, Nate. I think that you are on the absolute cutting edge of what can be done with the Salesforce program. And, I'm really inspired with what your team is also doing with AI. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm, I think I have this idea about AI that I think that it is both overhyped and underhyped at the same time, right? So you get two types of posts on LinkedIn right now about AI, right? You get the people who say, wow, I just Claude coded an app and it's amazing in 30 minutes that I would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for. And then you get the people saying, wow, I just dove into a Claude coded app and it's a mess, right? And so you can basically be in either camp right now. I feel like you can be in this is this is going to radically change our whole economy, and it's totally overhyped. And I tend to like to say I want to somewhere be in the middle of that, right? And I think that frames a lot of our perspective of let's focus on utilizing AI in a secure way, and that's key for a lot of our legal clients, a lot of our regulated clients, that focuses on solving solutions like to problems that you have today, right? And that sounds, a little pedantic probably, but I think it's important to say that because I think there's a lot of pie in the sky ideas about AI that may come true, in 6 months or a year or whatever. And then there's a lot of like people, we don't need to do that. And I would say, let's focus on solving a problem today, right? And while looking towards that future that we're looking out to, 6 months to a year and saying, hey, what's coming down the line, but how can we solve the problem today? So one of the big things that we see, right, kind of the initial thing that people really liked about, AI in business context was its ability to quickly summarize what's going on with a client, right? Okay, that's pretty standard. You can do that pretty much easily in any AI tool out there. But one of the next frontiers that we see is how can we get it to take away a lot of the manual work that you're already doing right now, right? So, one of the things we've talked a lot about is you have a lot of phone conversations, right? A lot of our clients have a lot of phone conversations with their clients, and then they have to do a lot of follow-up actions on those phone conversations. So a thing that we can solve right now is how do we take all those follow-up actions away from you out of the phone conversation? How do we just do it automatically, right? And that's a 10-20% time savings right there, right? And annoyance. People hate that stuff, right? It's so annoying to do follow-up tasks and computer, clicking around in whatever system you're using. So that alone, that's like an easy win. But then when you think about the farther out items, right? What we're trying to set people up for is to take advantage of better and better LLMs as the AI landscape improves and gets more mainstream and more tools integrate. We want to make sure that your data is, for lack of a better term, correct, right? So we want to, it's going to sound really boring, but we want to architect a solution that is going to operate the right way for the long term so that you're not just honestly blowing through your AI overage bills because it's sorting through way too much data all at once. We want to make more efficient usage of those so it can efficiently find the answer and then utilize the AI for summarizing things that we can't summarize inside of a database, basically. So we're trying to push for a deep understanding of really solid architecture for our clients so that in 6 months we can take advantage a lot of the new AI tools. So that's kind of our strategy right now. It's focus on core problems like the follow-up actions, like the easy ones, the follow-up actions, like quick agents that do, send emails to clients to follow up really quickly, right? Making sure that leads are moving down the funnel automatically, making sure that we're prioritizing the right leads or the right clients at the right time. Those are all the things we're really trying to solve today. And then in the future, 6 months down the line, we can do even more things like, write briefs and write all the very complex documents that come out of a lot of our clients' production, if you will. That's going to be coming down in the next few months as the LLMs get better, as we can ground into more of your internal processes as well, because that's a lot of it is like we can't write good documents if we don't have the customization of Zayed Law or of whatever our other clients are. And so that's kind of the way that we look at it.
How are you and your team building the AI models?
Yeah. So crucially, we rely on large language models that already exist, which most people do, right? And so the big ones out there, Claude and OpenAI and Gemini and Grok, and these are the big LLMs, right? So what we see our job as doing is, for the large language models, we're effectively further tuning, which is a bad word, but further tuning the models towards your company, or maybe a better way to say it is we're grounding these models in your company's information in the database, and then also the narrative information, like what does a good email to a client look like for you, right? Because what looks like a good email to a client for you is probably different than what it looks like for me, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing with existing LLMs. The next step, though, that we're trying to push people to is, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyways. How do we build out what we would call so there's large language models, right, that have basically downloaded the whole internet, right? So they, and then some, right? They've downloaded the whole internet. They have it all in there, and it's predicting what next word to produce based on probability based on what the whole internet says. So, some Reddit post somewhere said this, and that's fed into the model, as well as, emails from, and I'm not kidding you, from the Enron failure, right? Like that was a big initial, some history on like large language models. The initial large language model that everybody used to start, this is a couple of years ago, was all the emails that came out of the Enron failure. They were all published. And so a lot of those made up initial like large language models, because it was like just normal correspondence back and forth that you could just download for free, because it was on the DOJ's website. Anyway, so all that's in there. And then it's just predicting what the next word is, right? And that's just general. And that's why we have hallucinations. And that's why we have, like, oh, this isn't tailored to my business and things like that. So what I want to go is eventually build for companies small language models. And that's the term I'm going to get in trouble for, because some people don't believe in small language models, but I do. So the idea is, what if we did a private model just based on all of your emails and all of your documents and all of your data, and built a smaller language model around that? And that's ultimately what we're pushing all of our clients. That's the 6 month, a year out thing, is how do you build yourself a small language model? Write it to you, right? So that you truly understand, like you can use a small language model to speak in the voice of your business exclusively, and nobody else has access to it. And that's those are the models that we're using.
I want my small language model to sound like Jeffrey Skilling. You know who that is. That's by the way, you know Tom Skilling? You've heard of this man?
Yes. Yeah.
He had a tremendous blog that was great about talking about strange meteorological events. But anyways, so the small language model can you give us an example of one that exists, or maybe one that we would know? An example I'd toss out is like, are the AI small models, Even Up and Eve, the ones that generate demands for law firms, are those small language models?
So those are typically using large language models that they have tuned with their own, the term is tuning, on top of a large language model. So a small language model would, instead of starting with a large language model, would start with just your data, right? So we would take all of your demands, right? And we would feed all of those demands into an engine. Fortunately, by the way, this is getting supported more broadly. So there's a few products out there that are starting to support this. We're still on the cutting edge a little bit, but Google even has a product that supports this. And effectively, there's ways that we could utilize Salesforce to do this as well with some of their products as well. But yeah, we would actually, instead of starting with the large language model, we would start with all of your documents, basically.
What are the pros and cons of doing that? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm intuiting, like, my fear of a small language model is that it would quickly become out of date. And
Mhm.
it would need constant updating, and that might be a daunting task.
Yeah.
And also, like, I mean, to give you, real world examples, when we've played with the demand gen softwares, I mean, despite what a lot of people have said, we saw a lot of inaccuracies. We saw a lot of numbers that were just wrong. We run a subrogation, like ledger or medical bills through it. And
Yeah.
it's like, what are these numbers? And then manipulating it is very difficult. Maybe you have thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're basically already saying it. So the pros of a large language model is it's going to be always updated by somebody else, right? The pros of a small language model is it's going to probably hallucinate less, but it will have less broad information about the overall world. So those are your kind of trade-offs there. Now the question is, can you use, and this is what we're trying to work on right now, is can you use a little bit of contextual awareness to use both, right, at the same time, right? So, and that's where you have to figure out how do we use the models to make it, or use some sort of contextual awareness to make a decision on using a small language model versus using a large language model. That is, I think, a next frontier that we're seeing in the overall AI space for corporate models, basically. So hopefully soon we'll see some better things out there that allow us to build out, demands that are tailored to you all, that are utilizing better data, and then also being updated so we can get both worlds. I will also say, and this is probably a better thing to say too, part of the reason, going back to what I said earlier, of we are structuring your data the right way so that it's easily usable by AI models. So specifically the way that you're talking about the medical bill ledger, right? The negotiations back and forth, right? Some of that is, we are just going to build out the structure the right way in Salesforce so that we can see we have an object for medical bill negotiations. We're going to see what the offer was, what the response was, what the, send out all the back and forth basically that you have on the negotiations. And then we will very explicitly tell the model, hey, pull from that and don't do anything else, right? Don't try to editorialize. Don't try to be creative when pulling in the ledger. Just pull in the ledger. So some of that too is not even in the like small language model or large language model idea. It's just structuring your data the right way, and then telling the model, don't get creative, don't get cute with this. Just pull from here because we have it. We know what we've got, and we want to return exactly this in the ledger. So,
Do you think that the AI small language model, as you're proposing, is a candidate to be turned into a product and sold to other firms, or is that something that needs to be built individually for each firm or each one of your clients, for example?
yeah, I think it needs to be built individually because it has, the whole idea of it is it has a lot of proprietary information. And so we couldn't take the, Zayed one and give it to another client because it would intentionally have very proprietary information to you, right? So we couldn't share it with another client. And it would actually defeat the purpose for us to share it with another client. Now, the structure of building a small language model is that could be replicated firm to firm, but we would still have to ingest all of their data and then we would have to tune it to their individual preferences. And what I say by tuning is like, is this actually a good letter or is it not a good letter, right? Is this a good email or is this not a good email? Like we could pull in all the data, but is it good or bad, basically? Is in a very simple terms. It's not that simple, but that's basically what we'd have to like make those decisions with you all when we're building that model. So
I'm going to describe this in basic terms, but my understanding of the way that a lot of the AI demand gen software is right now, it's like you said, it's this large language model that has been, it has an overlay on top. The firm individual components are very minimal. It's like you upload a couple examples of demands, and then then you're off to the races. If a firm wants to use this, you insert the medical bills, insert the medical records, and this software is supposed to do the rest. Now, what are the pros and cons of doing it that way? And I'll add by saying some of these companies have become like unicorns, like billion-dollar valuations based on doing that. And maybe I can take it a step farther, which is I have this intuition, maybe you do too, that that particular model is not super sustainable long term, because everybody's going to be able to create their own software and or different GPT options are going to surpass that or be commensurate with that. Am I wrong here?
You're exactly right. Basically, like the reason why we've seen this like outcropping for every industry, this type of and I'm assuming here, I don't know all their back end. I don't know all their back end, everything, all these demand gen tools, exactly how they work because they are proprietary. However, based on what I know of the industry, this is how I'm assuming it all works. But what I would say is that's exactly right. Is there's not a huge moat around that industry because they're super quick to make, because you're basically you're using an existing model and then you're layering on. There are other like open source models or other items that or paid models that you can add on top to like help further align it to what you want, and then you do the final tuning based on, hey, here's some example demands that we like and don't like, and so on and so forth. And then the last bit is then upload a few of your documents to help us inform it. The problem with that is that the core data is still a large language model, right? And so it's still accessing everything, right? Or it's still a huge model that's accessing a lot of information, right? And so again, it's very easy to replicate these. And if somebody else wanted to do it, that they could. And one of the things we're seeing, we haven't seen it much in the legal space yet, but in the financial services space, huge amount of these specialized financial services tools that are, for example, call recording software that's specific to wealth management, right? There's multiple of these now and more that we know are coming up. And the reason why is because they're easy to create, right? They're just easy to create. You just align the tasks that it creates as out of your call to a more of a financial services model that you can load in, right? So all that to say, yeah, there's not a huge moat around it. And I do really believe for corporate functions, the best thing for each corporation is each company is to take its own data and make its own fully grounded AI models out of that, because that's taking your intellectual property that you already have, right? You have it, and it's making more work out of that much easier because you've already created all the intellectual property. Now, again, why people don't do it is because it's much easier to buy an off-the-shelf tool than it is to create your own model internally, right? So it's a lot harder up front. But and that's the moat question. This is why there's no moat around this, and there's a lot of moat around you having your own small language model. But again, I think that in the long run, this is what all companies are either trying to do or going to have to do. And then I think that coming back to all this, I think the tools that enable that are actually the ones that are going to be unicorns very quickly, right? And stay that way and not go away, because those are it's the it's the Levi jeans example, right? The gold rush of California, Levi made all the money selling jeans to people, right? You want to be the infrastructure behind the thing that's actually going to create that everybody's going to use, right? Because that's going to probably be the thing that is fully unicorn, is when we can get a really easy tool that allows an end user, not a non-technical user, to build effectively a small language model. I think that's going to be huge. So
what are the best products on the market to do that right now for it?
Yeah, so the best one right now, and actually I'm going to have to look up the name. I think it's called sorry, let me look this up. Hold on. What is it? Gemma. Sorry. Yeah, it's Gemma. Is the Google tool, right? So Google has a great one called Gemma. And you can utilize. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
This is where my thinking goes here. Is who's to say that the data that an organization has is sufficient to build a like a small language model for internal use? Like maybe that wouldn't be super useful for an organization, or who's to say that it would be useful for an organization? Like at what size does an organization have to be for that small language model to actually be useful?
Yeah, that is a great question. So, and the answer is you're correct, which is why sometimes it's, a lot of people it's not worth the investment and the time. I think in legal, it'd be hard to be small enough to not have enough content, because you're producing written content all day, right? There's so much information that you have that is that it would be fed into a small language model. You're going to have, and I know because I've seen the filing cabinets in your office, right? They're just chock full of stuff. You have enough. And so you just probably need to be in business for a while as a law firm, maybe a couple of years, and then you'd probably have enough. I think maybe that's some of the problem with some of the, let's go with finance, right? So let's take wealth management. We work in wealth management. They don't have as much documents generated, right? They have emails back and forth, but that's probably not enough to really get them what they need, especially if they're a smaller firm, right? So they might not be able to create a great small language model out the gate, especially given some of the off-the-shelf solutions, maybe, because they don't generate as many documents as you would, right? And then maybe on the middle ground would be like, well, and I don't even know if this is in the middle ground. One that's a great opportunity, but I don't know how it's going to work because they don't have a lot of documents, is skilled trades like plumbers, roof installers, things like that, right? There's a huge brain drain going on in those industries, right? Because a lot of the people are retiring that are very good at, let's say, plumbing, right? And it's really hard to get new people in the door. We're trying, but it's, there's a huge skill gap in the middle there, right? So how do you get really excellent plumbers to train junior plumbers, right, on how to on all the information that they have. Another good example, again in the same vein, is we work with like pool cleaners, right? And the people who have been there for 20 years and know every Pentair and Hayward pool pump in the world, how do they get that information and all the nuances that they know in their brain? How do they get that to the junior people who are great at cleaning pools, but there's a huge skill gap, right, between cleaning a pool and being able to fix a pump or a salt cell or something like that? Like, how do you bridge that gap, right? And that's where maybe there's documentation in the middle, right? There is, but a lot of that is just learned knowledge. And how do you get that out of the senior people and to a small language model or something, so that then it informs, your junior people? I think that's going to be, that's a huge opportunity. And I don't think we have a great solve for it yet, if I'm honest. So
you're anticipating AI being involved in filling that skill gap. In what way?
Yeah, I think that, so when I get on site, right, let's say I'm cleaning a pool, right? And I say this because we do actually have pool cleaning clients that's more on the field service side. When I get on site, and I've been to a pool closing before, I have, and the pool's a little cloudy, and I'm going to clean the pool, and I notice a bad sound coming from the pump, right, that I don't like. Well, if I'm one of the more experienced people, which is who I closed the pool with when I went in the dead of winter, not it's like December in the New York area. If I'm one of the senior people, I know exactly what that sound means, right? But I'm one of the junior folks who hasn't done this that long. I've been on the job for 1 or 2 years. Who knows, right? Me, I don't do pool stuff. I have no idea, right? But they know exactly what it is. They know exactly what to look at. That it already comes to mind. Oh, I'm sure it's under warranty, so we can call Pentair and right, whatever. That type of knowledge is the skill gap. So what if, just to theorize here, what if you could just open your phone and say, hey, listen to this sound. What does it sound like? This is the type of pump you're at, or, in this case, it already knows, because their system knows all the assets at each client's house because they've installed these pumps. It's this model of pump, it's this sound. Okay, we know that means that the salt cell's clogged, or whatever, the filter's clogged, and so whatever, right? That is the level of detail that we could get, and then it could recommend next steps to the junior folks, to the new people, and then allow them, and then walk them through the actual repair potentially. That I could see AI helping us out with, is to bridge that skill gap. That's for pools. I think we could apply that to any industry. Ultimately, it's just, how do we get the data? You have a lot of data, right? Because you have the written information, right? You have the phone calls, you have everything. It's the industries that don't have that. It's in people's brains. It's going to be more interesting to pull that out and get that down on paper.
So I love the pool example. I've been spending a lot of time opening a pool lately, and I'm excited to see that LLM you're creating. So
yeah,
like you said that my firm has a lot of data, and I would say we do as well. And the reason for this is because just by the amount of work we're doing, it is a lot of litigations that go deep into discovery, numerous
Mhm.
depositions, numerous experts, and like a lot of motion practice, And so whenever we talk to, in the instances that we have talked to AI demand gen companies, that they definitely don't feel very strong about use cases for example, a medical malpractice case
Mm.
or complex discovery issue type situation. And the reason for that is, well, let's say that there are 100 different items that we need to obtain in the course of discovery in a medical malpractice case, table of contents or the bylaws or different policies and procedures, or maybe different versions of a medical record. And the AI is not seeing through this stuff. Like
Mhm.
as an attorney, when we get a record, we literally look at it and we think, okay, well, that's not true. We have to go dig for it. And the AI, like, it's too trusting or something. There's
Yep.
that component. And then like the complexity that's required to draft a 15-page response to a motion for summary judgment on a one of these complex med mal cases is, I don't feel confident in its ability to generate that motion or that response. Do you think that that's coming?
I mean, yes, I think it is coming. I think the way that it's going to come, though, um, is going to have to be much more custom to each individual firm, right? Because this is that knowledge, that intellectual property. I mean, that's the term, but it really is your intellectual ability of knowing what looks what are you why are you why does something look wrong, right? um and there's been a lot of writing more recently, especially about how uh large language models and really chat bot models, so specifically chat based models, are designed to agree with you and make you feel good. And so they are going to say, hey, this looks good, right? They're kind of tilted towards that. So they're designed that way. So that's part of the reason why you're feeling that, of like, you're like, no, that's not right. So what we need to do is get into, either these companies need to get into more lawyers, very experienced lawyers' brains, and be like, well, what are you looking for? And that needs to happen thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times, right? Over and over and over again. Or we do it on a firm by firm basis, and it's probably a both and, where we say, hey, you give us the good stuff, right? Give us all the good stuff. And that's what we're gonna train this whole model on. So I think that's the judgment, the critical thinking that you're doing on a regular basis, because you've seen thousands of cases over your time being a lawyer, and that's very hard to replicate. And especially with a model that has probably not been reviewed by specifically medical malpractice lawyers thousands and thousands and thousands of times to say, nope, you missed this, you missed this, you missed this is not good, this is not, effectively that's what it would take to actually design this central system that way.
So it the most success that an AI demand like oriented organization has is with putting in the medical records, putting in the medical bills, probably putting in the subrogation statement, something as simple as a police report, and then asking it to output, essentially a demand, or, like a special summary, which is like a list of the medical bills that are related.
Yeah.
But then the issue is, okay, which of these bills are actually related and which ones are not? And then what's your confidence level in the software? Because, do we have to look through, again, every record and every bill to check the AI? Do we have to go through and, are we going to look through and we're going to, like, let's say it's a complicated case where, like there's or a relatively complicated case where there's a car crash and it causes, neck and back problems. And then they find some incidental kidney tumor. The AI says that's related, but it's not. Or alternatively, the kidney was bruised and the AI doesn't relate that when, in actuality, it should have been related. And that's a big swing. In a lot of those like demand gen type scenarios, and this is not so much in my firm, but in many firms out there in the USA, are they going to check that? Who is checking that to make sure that it's accurate? Maybe people don't really care because it's like a cost benefit thing. I don't know. You have thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, I think for complex, this is why we're not there yet, right? Because, and it's going to take a while for us to get there. And well, I guess I should say that one thing we have to remind people is that AI is actually not, as it is today, it is not making critical thinking decisions and judgment calls, right? It's predicting what the next word, I'm oversimplifying here, but for the purposes of this conversation, it's predicting what the next word should be, right? Based on a lot of factors, right? So this is where we still need in all of these a human in the loop to make judgment calls, right? You're going to see this on the other side too, but I think the structure there is actually set up reasonably well. I've been to the doctor and they have the AI note taker, right? I'm sure you probably have too, right? So a lot of medical notes are being written through AI models now, right? What's the big one, Abridged or whatever it is. But the structure was already there for a human to review that because, it just went from doctors were paying scribes to now doctors are paying for an app that does the AI note writing, and they're still reviewing. They still had to review everything that a scribe wrote. And, if they were a good doctor, they did. I'm assuming they all do. But now they have to review what the AI wrote. And I think that's because there's that medical decision making, as you know, that is key critical thinking decision making for saying this is why I made this medical decision, right? And on your side, I think there's still, because we're not there yet, there's still the smart human that has to sit there and say, okay, what was the kidney actually bruised from this or from something else? Or what, can we actually see that? Can we prove that? And that is where you do still need a human in the loop for now, because AI is not making critical thinking decisions for you yet, right? Because it's not designed to do that yet. So
I recall you mentioning that you watched the show The Pit, and I can't help but think you were giving me an example from that show, maybe.
Yes.
So, this is a television show. What is it, on HBO? And
it's on HBO. Yeah.
They integrated like AI, medical charting, and the provider that had the actual duty to the patient, would be tasked with like reviewing the accuracy. But that's tough. That's a big challenge to ask a person, not just somebody who's in the medical field, but somebody who's in the legal field as well, or maybe any profession, where they're routinely reviewing documents that were prepared by AI. That's a recipe to be lulled into complacency. Especially, it's doubly so since, as you have indicated, it is people who have the duty. Like at a law firm,
right?
A legal assistant might input the medical records and bills in the subrogation ledger, ask an AI to create a demand, and that thing goes out. And was it reviewed by an attorney? Like medical charting, I mean, was it reviewed in scrupulous detail by a medical provider, a licensed medical provider? Scrupulous detail is in every word read. Is that the duty? It kind of makes me wonder, is there a set of duties that is required for professionals, in the utilization of AI?
It's a really good point, and actually, it's a very good point that I've talked about for a while, right? So let's go with, medicine is an easy one to talk about just because I think it's reasonably universal. But I think, a lot of people thought probably a few years ago that radiology was, doomed, right? Because, it's just pattern recognition, which is not true. But that a lot of people thought, it's just pattern recognition, which again doesn't take into a lot of the context that radiologists go through and all that stuff. But one of the reasons why it's going to be very hard I think AI can assist radiology, make it more efficient probably, but why it's going to be very hard to get humans out of the loop there is what you said. There's a liability. There's a human responsibility, right, for humans to review what's been fed to them from a large image model or a large language model, right? And part of that is the liability. There's liability in your business. There's liability in the medical field. There's liability in my field. When you're entering into a contractual relationship with somebody in whatever way, shape, or form, you have a duty to perform, right? And whatever that professional duty is, legal, medical, other, whatever, there's a duty. So yeah, you can't just rely on an AI model to do that for you and walk away. And part of that is it's not going to fly if it makes a mistake, and then you can't just blame your AI model for it making a mistake. So I think there is still a duty for a human to review in detail what has been generated and utilize it for the efficiencies that it generates, but then also take responsibility for the content that it generates, right? Because if at some point we don't have humans in the loop, then what's taking the actual, somebody is taking the responsibility, right? Somebody's paying for the AI, somebody's taking responsibility at the end of the day for that, what it generates, and who is that, right? So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on it. So
I actually I spend more time than most people know with radiologists looking at imaging studies, thinking about imaging, whether something was diagnosed. The common thread that I hear in a lot of these radiologists work at teaching institutions of the highest level, and they use AI, and it's a resounding, it's pretty darn accurate. It's amazingly accurate. It's an amazing thing, but is it 100%? No, not. And so, I think that, they definitely give it a complete perusal. It hasn't abrogated their duty to look at the imaging study. But that gets to where I'm going with, the more complex legal work. I think that for demand gen, these AI organizations have identified higher volume firms that have they have case patterns that are very consistent. It's a visit, it's an ambulance, it's a visit to the ER, some primary care doctors, and then maybe one visit to an ortho, and then some physical therapy, maybe a pain doctor, and that's the pattern every case. But when it gets more complex than that, like those AI models are, I think, my intuition is they're not as useful yet.
So I think that's where firms like yours and probably mine, I would say, are going to, it's going to be a while before we can, obviously we use AI, right? Obviously you're probably going to use AI. I'm not going to speak for you. Well, you probably will, but in areas that don't require as much judgment, right? You still need that attorney reviewing the case, right? Because you're doing complex med mal, you're doing complex cases, right? Truck accidents, like these things are complex, right? It's, we're still building complex software tools. You need architecture. You need to understand the actual solution that we're providing and provide something that's um that's done well. And I'll give a classic example, right? I have a friend who plotted up an app, right? And was like, hey, I'm gonna build this app. And he's not a software developer, but he's very excited about it. It's great. I'm all about it, right? It's great. But I was asking him some questions about it, and I said, how how's it getting this data? And he said, oh, it's downloading the database. I said, and he's talking about another system. And I said, the whole database? And he said, yeah, the whole database. And I was like, oh. And he's like, yeah, I know that's not efficient. I was like, no, that's like, that'll just wreck your computer completely, right? Your virtual machine, because you should hit like an endpoint, where you can get only specific data back, not all the data all at once, and then you're parsing it in your app, right? So it's just a good example of, you still need an architect to make sure, yeah, they're, all my friends who are software developers are either all using AI tools to write code. That's fine, but you need somebody who knows what they're doing to make sure to operate that, right? And to make it efficient and make the judgment calls that we're talking about, to do high quality work still. And I guess that's where we would land, and that's where I think you would land, not to speak for you, but where you would land is saying you still need a good lawyer, right? You still need a good lawyer who's making good judgment calls, versus high volume, again, there's a time and a place for that, but I don't think that's what, you all do all the time, right? And so you still need a really good lawyer who's behind you, who's fighting for you, right? So
So you've mentioned your friend that, quote unquote, clotted up. I think, at some point you mentioned you were at a school fair and, or you were speaking to some, maybe it was a college event where students were creating software using Claude, and, you were speaking to the Salesforce's place in the future. What are your thoughts about using the Salesforce environment and platform moving into the future, given the implications of AI as we've been discussing?
yeah, I think that it actually, in a lot of ways, strengthens Salesforce's position, in the future. And here's why. I think that there is actually, that's a really good example of like Claude, and I'm picking on Claude, all the AI, all the overall LLMs that are used to code, right? When you write code, there's a bazillion ways to do it, right? That's the whole point, right? You can do anything a million different ways. And it's all in the judgment calls that you make to when you're writing code that make it efficient, secure, trustworthy, right? Things like that. So while you may be able to use AI, or you should be using AI to write like various automations to make your life better, or maybe even customize the user experience and things like that. There's certain things at the base level that you want to, that Salesforce provides as and they call it their trust layer, right? Like, but a trust layer at the very base level. So at their database and their back end is secure, is trustworthy and secure, right? And when you can rely on things like, I mean, this is going to sound really, really boring, but it's really important. Sharing rules, right? It's called sharing rules inside of Salesforce. So basically, and this is why it's really important for legal. If you have ethical walls, right, which any law firm has ethical walls, right? You need to have very, very strong like record sharing rules so that maybe, one attorney isn't, or one employee or a team, or, people are not allowed to see other records, right? They can't just go into the database and see all the records, right? That is default behavior inside of Salesforce. So by utilizing that system and trusting, that we've done this for decades, they have a really well-built system when it comes to permissions and sharing rules and security and overall just enterprise security, right? And enterprise scale. And then you can layer on custom UI elements and layer on custom automations that are built on the bedrock of that trustworthy foundation. That's huge, right? And layer on agents, AI agents, and layer on LLMs and everything, but still based on the bedrock of a very secure and enterprise system that is Salesforce. That's, I think, where a lot of organizations that don't have teams and teams of people that are writing their own CRM, which you really shouldn't build your own CRM, even in the days of AI built apps. Like, it's just not worth Adam Zayed's time to write up a whole CRM that may or may not be secure, may or may not be the most efficient, may or not, it could be not as, we don't know. And that's the thing about Salesforce. It provides that base, and then the springboard to jump off of, where we can then create really cool apps that are secure and scalable and things like that. And that's why we bought into the, that's why we're committed to Salesforce, right? That's why we believe in it, as we believe in a lot of the things that they're doing with their AI platforms, as well as their trust and security of the base Salesforce platform that we build everything on.
Now, one thing, as the idea for CaseForge was coming about, something that I spent time contemplating, I know that you have, I don't know if we've talked about it, maybe we did, is there a future where a law firm doesn't need a CRM, and it just relies on maybe a small language model or something like that? Because, the interface is important. Having dozens or hundreds of people working in the same environment or collaborating is important. What do you think about that? Maybe you can prognosticate 5, 10, 20 years out about how an organization is going to be communicating with itself. How are they going to be interacting with the client data? Thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I tend to be a very strong believer in what I would call structured, well, no, not what I would call it, but what is called structured data, right? Especially when it comes to organizations like law firms, and especially when it comes to organizations like yours, where you need to produce, for example, that special summary with that table of all the bills, right? With that table, or the negotiation summary, right? With the back and forth, you need to see it, and it needs to be right every time. It shouldn't be a guess, or leave it up to chance, or let the LLM be cute, right? And say something that, insert something that's not supposed to be there. There is value, like, even in all of this, there is a lot of value in having a structured database, right? And so whether or not it's a CRM or it's a or it's just a database with a UI layer on top of it, or maybe it's a database with just a chat layer on top of it, I still think that the idea of having structured data is not going to go away in the long run. How we interact with it might change, right? 20 years down the line, maybe, and I could be very wrong here because that's 20 years down. Maybe it's just all a chat bubble, or it's all just in our brains and we just think and it comes, we don't even need to talk. It just comes from our brains and it goes right in there. But at some core, we still need something to be true and something to actually be the thing that we can, some system of record that we can rely on. It's like, this is what we've agreed to is going to be the table of data that we're going to operate off of, right? And that requires some sort of structured relational database, right? And so I believe in the power of a structured relational database at its core for the long run. And the iteration of that in what you're talking about, and this has been true for the past 30 years, is a CRM, right? Are we going to call it a CRM in 30 years? Probably of some sort. It's just how do we interact with it? I think that front end, the interaction with that CRM is going to change. So it might not be logged in through the Salesforce UI as we know it. It might be, we think and it just communicates with the database in the back end or whatever, right? Or it might be that we just type into a chatbot and say, hey, what do I need to know about, Adam Zayed's, case right now? And it just pulls up from the structured data and from the unstructured data, all the information. But it's got to be stored somewhere and it's got to be somewhat related for it to be efficient and for it to scale in the long run and for it to be true, right? For us to be able to say, yes, this is true. So I guess my point is, if we still in 20 years need something to be objectively true, then I would argue we'll probably have we'll probably have some sort of relational database that's still operating for business functions. And then we will, obviously layer on a lot of other ways of interacting with that.
Is your money on Salesforce for the CRM of the future?
Yes. I mean, obviously it is. And in what my business and what I've invested in, yes, I think it is. I think that because of their history in the space, because of what they know, because of their ability to, because of their customer base, actually, because they have all of the feedback and the knowledge from having whatever hundreds of thousands of customers that they have. Yes, I think that they're going to continue adapting to the future needs of how it's actually going to be, how different systems are going to operate with CRMs. And you see this in their announcement, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, in what they call Headless 360, which is basically saying they're now exposing all agents, all models, all data, all everything using APIs. So you can just interact with the actual backend and that trust layer and everything using APIs. And then you can interact with it on the front end in whatever way you want. So whether that's through a tool like Slack that Salesforce also owns and develops, or whether it's a fully custom front end that you write, and actually now it's in beta, but can now host inside the Salesforce platform. Like you could write a completely custom front end, and then interact with the CRM in that way. All of that is doable, right? So they're really investing in that in the future. So yeah, I do think, obviously I'm biased here, but I do believe in it, and we eat our own dog food. This is how we interact with our CRM, right? We use Slack all the time to interact with our Salesforce instance on a daily basis, right? And we are, pushing our customers to do this, and we are, investing in the growth of our business as if this is going to be the future, at least for the, foreseeable future, right?
What is the future for Strong CRM?
Yeah. what's the future for Strong CRM? I think that for us, this year actually we are changing around our internal AI tooling because we are really investing in creating maybe not quite a small language model, but a very, very robust internal, um, uh, shall I say, knowledge base of what's the next steps with this client. How should we build this out? How how have we done this in the past? What's the how have we what creative solution have we come up with for this integration? That's always what we have to this integration is coming up again. What's the way we did that in the past? Oh, all right. That is we're changing around in a lot of our internal tooling to really get that central brain of Strong CRM into the right spot so that front end language model can interact with it and understand our business at a very, very deep level. So what that means is, at a very practical level, when I go and type into my Slack bot, which is our Slack AI thing, and I say, what do I need to know about Zayed, right, Law or CaseForge or whatever? It will not only pull up, obviously, my Salesforce records, that's easy, but it's going to understand the context of my emails, our phone calls, all the code that we've written, all of the Slack messages that we've written, and down to, what invoices have you paid, like down to the financial information, because it's also going to integrate with our financial systems as well. So that way I can do, in one request, I can access basically my whole business end to end in one system. And that will be there, mid this year. It's almost mid this year. So maybe like September of this year, we'll have that all done, wrapped up, and ready to go. So not just it basically pulling all of our data into one system. So that's kind of our short-term plan in terms of internal. And then broadly, I think continuing to expand our clients' replication of that. So the way that we see it is, I'm really big on, like, I want to eat my own dog food, right? I want to understand what the cutting edge is, and then go to our clients and say, hey, we've done this. You should also do this. So I think it's really, how do we take that? How do we innovate? How do we make sure we're doing everything in a way that's driving efficiency and driving better client service in our business? And then how do we help replicate that in other companies, our clients' companies, right? And that, I think, is the conversation that I'm having a lot with a lot of our clients, is how do we get as much data into the right spots as possible, so that then with one prompt, with one question, you can access exactly what you need, right? And that's the conversation. I've had that conversation countless times already in the last month, because we're doing it and we want our clients to all do that. So that's the next big frontier, is driving efficiency in our own business with AI, and then driving efficiency in our clients' businesses, probably with AI as well. So, yeah.
So we've been working together on CaseForge, and I don't think that we've described what that is. I mean, I'm very excited about it, and I would say I'm honored to be working with you and Strong CRM and building this product out. Maybe you can say what it is and what it's intended to do.
Yeah. So CaseForge at its core is a full end-to-end legal management system for personal injury firms, right? An AI-enabled legal management system for personal injury firms. I think it could also expand beyond personal injury, but right now we're designing it obviously for you all, so it could go full legal management. But for right now, we're designing it specifically for PI firms, because I don't think there's a good one that really focuses on PI in the way, that we've talked about, right? All the special summaries, all the negotiations, all the things that we've talked about that's like you feel like are missing in the market. That's what we're designing for, right? And so that's what it is. And so when I say end to end, I mean everything from, we're building out, I think, one of the coolest, this is where I get real nerdy about it, but one of the coolest attribution models that I've ever built before. And I'm really nerdy about marketing attribution models, but all the different ad mix that that personal injury firms spend money on, right? I don't think anybody has all the various integrations that you need right now that say, okay, we're going to pull all that in and attribute it the right way, right? So that's cool. All the way from that to lead, to case intake, to case management, and then maybe eventually financials. We want to get all of that into one system, right? And that's what we're doing. And then layer AI on top of that so that it can take away a lot of the grunt work and a lot of the inefficiencies and start to generate a lot of these documents, not take away the human judgment, but really start to make sure that we're filling in the right fields, we're getting the right dates, we're getting the right information, and then also making people's lives easier and more efficient on a day-to-day basis with that AI layer. That's my vision of what we're doing. Is that a fair vision, Adam?
It's a wonderful description. And one of the things that gives me a lot of confidence in building this project, because, it's a big undertaking. It's very exciting. And there are other competitors in this industry that have, Salesforce involvement, but I feel like there's a distinction in terms of what we're doing because of the full suite of Salesforce like offerings that are being included here, and then your expertise and your ingenuity and layering that on top of our, I'm going to be less than humble, but our like specific legal tailorings that I believe, and I think many believe, not just me, it's not just our firm, but this model that we utilize leads to optimal outcomes. And it's not just pre-lit demand gen, which is if I called you up and I said, Nate, hey, can we work on pre-lit demand gen? That would be a lot easier than what we're doing. You're working on a suite that is, can handle pre-lit demand gen, and it will, it is the, I'm going to be humble here, and I'm going to say, from what I've seen, it is the most advanced marketing attribution tool in the legal industry. Like everything you've done with cookies, everything we've done with, the billboard algorithms, all of the creativity and just the fun that we're having in terms of that marketing attribution piece. I don't see that anywhere else. I don't think that exists. And then on top of that, just like a really solid legal CMS or CRM that can, help lawyers, that can actually help lawyers litigate cases, keep track of what's going on. It actually is something that serves attorneys that are filing cases, that are getting deep into litigation. And one of the things that I absolutely love that you have created more than, it's up there in terms of what we've been talking about, is what you've dubbed the Excel killer. I guess that's an idiom you use frequently. but it's methodology for creating medical special summaries outside of just using Excel, which is, it kind of feels stone aged, I mean, what is the Excel killer? What is your methodology for creating a medical special summary that's built into the structured data?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was the charge that you gave me. You said, it's so much easier for our lawyers to just enter data into Excel than it is to enter into a system, right? Where you have to click, click, click. And so what we said is, well, let's build the structure for that is going to match to what you need for a medical special summary, which your existing system doesn't have that layer. There's an extra layer that you need, but then also let's build the user interface to allow for a lawyer to interact with it like they would interact with Excel. Just tab over, edit, and then save in bulk, right? I think a lot of people want that, right? For like a system of record to have that level of editability so that you could just quickly go through with it. That's a huge thing. It's the little UI. I mean, it's not little. It took some time to build, but it's the little UI things that people really, really want. And that's what we were trying to build in that Excel. I wouldn't say killer, but the special summaries are, we can apply it to actually anything inside your instance, but that piece of code. So
it's a simple thing to, for people outside of the legal industry, but if you're in the legal industry and you actually file lawsuits and you actually do trials, you need the ability to manipulate the medical special summaries into a very granular detail. You need to be able to edit them, because at any good time, a good judge can look at your medical bills and say, well, that's not related. This is related. Or alternatively, you go in with gross totals for a medical facility, like, facility A has 400,000 in bills, facility B has 200,000 in bills, total 600,000. That might not fly. They might want every little bit of the detail. And for us to be able to readily manipulate, edit, create, and to have it be something that is intuitive and efficient, and something that is better than Excel is amazing to me. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. And yes, the billboard model. I mean, again, a lot of it is you. We came up with an initial idea and you iterated on it. You were like, well, what if it was this way? Okay, cool. That's a good idea. So, but I think the billboard model is pretty sweet. I don't think anybody else is doing that. So it's pretty cool.
A lot of people are using heat maps, but then that's still like a, putting your thumb out there and trying to gauge the wind or something like that.
Yeah.
And admittedly, the model that we're talking about involves an algorithm that it's not like a super complex algorithm, but it's an algorithm nonetheless. And it's not going to be entirely accurate, but we're giving some attribution to all the different marketing that is being done, creating a better right, or, closer to right.
Yep.
So, that very excited about everything we're doing with CaseForge. Nate, maybe just like a couple last questions. You got some time here for that?
Yeah, we're good.
So when we're talking about a demand gen company, and I feel like I've been, almost, I don't want to talk bad about them, but you hear that they have 100 or 200 employees or 500 employees or whatever, and they're creating demands. Like what are they doing with all those employees? I kind of like am scratching my head. I'm like, what are all of them for?
Yeah. Without knowing, all their internal operations, but I think this is where, maybe some of the people who are a little more skeptical of AI right now, that every time that, one of these big AI companies posts a job for like a Salesforce admin, they say, oh, look at them, they need a Salesforce admin. The thing is, people still, like, as we said, these AI companies, they still need software developers. They still need finance people. They still need accountants. Still need customer service. They still need all the functions of the company to run the company. And I'll give you a good example from like the finance angle. I think it's going to be really hard to get rid of like bookkeeping even, because ultimately I have to pay my taxes, right? I need that to be accurate. I need that to be right. I need something to be true, right? And so I need my finance and accounting team to be using a finance and accounting system that is a structured database. It's a general ledger. It's got to be a ledger, right? That's the way that GAAP says it's got to be. Those are the standards, and I have to submit my taxes based on, a general the truth, right? And so it's like, yes, AI can help you with that, like categorize expenses and whatever, but you still need somebody to go in there and make sure that it's right. Right. You still need somebody who understands accounting that makes sure it's right. And I would say, that across the board at all of these companies, AI companies that are building AI models, companies that are building AI tuned models, things like that, they are all still have to run a company, right? They still need salespeople. They still need software developers. They still need finance people. They still need HR, right? This isn't all shopped out to AI agents, right? Because there's still a need for things to be true. There's still a need for humans to interact with humans. Like these are all needs, right? I'll give another example. There was an article in the New York Times about somebody who, created $1 billion company just on AI with, 2 employees. And I read through it. I thought it was a good article. But I think what they got wrong was that there were actually a lot of people involved, right? He was just relying on the fact that he could contract out to all of these pre-existing companies that already had the humans in place to automate things, right? And he used AI to like write the code and automate a lot of those things. And yeah, he used AI to do like customer service responses and stuff like that. But there were still a lot of humans involved. They just weren't direct employees of his business. So I think that the idea that you could just build a company with no people is probably not there yet. I would say, because you still need things to be true. You still need people to interact with people. You still need software developers to supervise. You still need somebody to like actually make judgment calls and decisions. And that's still required. And I would say that's probably what they're doing at those companies. So,
well, I in my mind's eye, I was like, okay, how many of these individuals are actually like engineers working on the LLM? And if so, what are they doing?
probably a lot of them. And what they're doing is there's still a system to maintain, right? So there's still an enterprise, and I'm making guesses here, but based on what I know about running a software company, there's still things that come up, system updates, new product pipeline. There's always new product pipeline that they got to build in. Whether or not you see it, there's new features they're working on, right? That are in their backlog. They got to build those out, right? Because they got to stay competitive with the market. So they need people who are building out new product features. They need to further tune the model because, people like you say, hey, it's not accurate enough, right? So they got to go in there and further tune the model. And then I'm sure, there's that. There's also probably a whole team of DevOps engineers that are running the actual systems, the pipelines behind that make sure that the servers are online and active and running. And and not overusing the LLMs that are backing all this up, so they're not paying all the overage charges and stuff. There's a lot that goes into actually building a software product that people don't see, right? And this is like, it's just, I've done it for, I haven't specifically built the software products, but I've worked in software for my whole career, so I know how this goes, right? And there's just a lot of stuff that goes into actually building a software product, and that takes a lot of software engineers. Not to mention your customer service, your finance, your sales, your, all the other people that are involved in those companies. So,
On the other hand, I imagine that small language model you were describing would be relatively easy to maintain.
Yeah, especially given the right tools, right? And I think this is where the work that needs to be done a little bit more is they just need to be a little bit more non-technical, but allow for you or people like you to upload all of their information and then effectively rate the quality of responses by yourself, so that you can actually so that you can create a great small language model. And it would need to walk you through that. And I don't think we're quite there yet to allow non-technical folks to be able to do that. The tools are a little too technical still. But I think we're going to get there. And then hopefully it's easier to maintain in the long run. So.
What do you think happens to firms or organizations that don't adopt AI 5-10 years from now?
I mean, they will get outcompeted. I think everybody has to adopt at least some internal AI tooling. They have to adopt AI models in their day-to-day operations overall, because ultimately the firms that do adopt AI will become more efficient, right? Will just become more efficient. And they're going to be able to offer better pricing, better client service, better, more efficient everything. And the ones that don't adopt some sort of AI model or AI philosophy internally are going to get outcompeted. I would liken it to similar to, in the probably, what was it, the 1980s, that they were starting to put computers on everybody's desk, right? And if you were a firm that said, we're not going to buy computers for everybody, right? Or you were an employee that said, I'm not going to learn how to use a computer, right? Well, eventually you're just going to get pushed out, right? And I would say that's how it is for AI today. Eventually, there's going to be enough like user-friendly AI and AI that works, and that we have pathways to make your part of putting a computer on everybody's desk was we had great software on those computers that made people efficient. People knew how to use Excel and Word and all the things that made your work day more efficient, right? Email. That's all happening right now with AI. We're figuring out those pathways to make our businesses more efficient with AI. And as that becomes more ubiquitous, then it will become much clearer over the next even 6 months of like, what are the tools that every business has to have to use AI on a daily basis? And then that'll start rolling out. And then there will be, hey, if you don't use AI, then like you're not going to be business anymore, right? So I do think it's going to be a requirement for businesses to stay in business is to be able to, much like it was, putting a computer on everybody's desk, we're going to have AI rules, tools, the whole bit, for every company in the next 5 years for sure. So,
I heard this aphorism, which is, and it was directed towards law firms. And it was, okay, there's two ways to adopt AI. One is, kind of like a surface level adoption, like maybe a law firm utilizes a tool, and it's not really integrated. It didn't really create efficiencies. It's just a subscription, And then, and another route is complete integration, which is like efficiencies in all of the processes of the firms. And, one of the things that I commend you on is, for us trial lawyers, one way we're taught to, handle juries is to be a tour guide, somebody that's trustworthy. And I think that, you do that. You focus on the low hanging fruit. You make it approachable. You implement it. And I suspect that I suspect that you go into a lot of organizations, and you diagnose inefficiency and you handle it. And a lot of times you probably have to fill in some gaps to appropriately and fully implement a Salesforce build or an AI integration. A lot of those ideas are coming from you. You were kind of operating and creating efficiencies for these organizations. You must love doing that.
I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I do. That's the best part of the job, is like, I love learning about businesses and how they operate and how we can make them more. I have always loved making business, and really myself, I'm selfish. Like, I want to do it for myself, but I want to do it for others as well. How do I make businesses more efficient using technology? How do I make people more efficient and enjoy their jobs more with technology? I love it. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. That's for sure. So yes. And honestly, learning about all the different types of businesses, and even within legal, the different types of law firms, the different ways that they operate, that's fun for me too. Right. It's I love it. So yeah.
So one thing that wait, is my last comment, but when we're building CaseForge, my prognostication about the future and my hope with CaseForge is that this is a product that ultimately the clients enjoy using, and that creates value for them, and creates transparency for them, and gives them a feeling of confidence that their law firm is doing a good job for them, and pursuing their case optimally, and that they're happy and confident clients. So, thank you very much for everything you're doing with CaseForge. It's, I think it's on the pinnacle of the industry. It's truly an innovative software that you're building. And thanks for joining me, Nate.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for being a great client. We always like fun clients like you, so who are thinking in the future as well. It's, again, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't hang out with you every week if I didn't love it. So it's great to work with you. So
thank you, Nate. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Take care.